Paul Skenes is showing signs of regression already, at least according to the Sports Illustrated article. In his first major league season, the 2023 #1 overall draft pick has turned heads with his blazing fastball and overwhelming command of the strike zone. He's become a household name overnight thanks to his early dominance, and was even the National League starter in the 2024 All-Star Game, an honor that only 5 other rookies share with Paul. He has burst out of the scene with such provenance that he has drawn comparisons to Steven Strasburg's hype, and within all of the craziness, we are seeing him be compared to some of the legendary figures in the history of baseball. But are we already seeing signs of Paul slowing down amidst a banner rookie year? According to some metrics and articles, there may be a case. So today, let's take a look at just how much weight there is behind the claim of Paul Skenes slowing down. And before I dive in, there's this really cool button that says subscribe on it. If you want to see it change colors, that would make my day. It goes a long way in supporting me in the page. Let me make this abundantly clear from the jump. I am not a glazer nor a hater of Paul Skenes, except for my girlfriend who is absolutely infatuated with Paul Skenes and her t-shirt she bought in Pittsburgh for $12. But I digress. I will merely be pointing out the statistical data in corroboration with those leading the charge behind a claim of Skenes' alleged worrisome trends. I'll only be using his MLB data and not his minor league numbers, so let's find out if the Sports Illustrated claim carries any weight or if this is a natural regression to the mean. First things first, it would be helpful to give context to what the Sports Illustrated article refers to and what is so problematic about Paul Skenes' recent numbers. In it, the author Brady Farkas states that Paul is slowing down after his blazing start. His entire argument is based off of all things, his fastest first inning pitch in each start taking a dip. That's it. That's what got Sports Illustrated so worried that Paul may be wearing out. Farkas goes on to state that his total number of pitches at 100 plus miles per hour per each 5 starts is, quote, dropping at an insane rate. To his credit, there is a stark drop off, and he does mention how the Pirates are likely in his ear telling him to slow it down. But the fact that this article uses buzzwords such as worrisome, problematic, and other inferences to make it seem like Paul Skenes is in dire trouble is hilarious, especially for such a reputable source such as Sports Illustrated. But there's a lot more to look at here if we want to truly see if Farkas is right about Skenes slowing down. I wanted to mention that I am writing this as of August 13th, just days after the SI article came out. Anything that takes place after this video writing is not included. Moving on, the first thing I'm going to look at in this case is this aforementioned fastball. For Paul Skenes, that pitch is his bread and butter. With it, he has shown that he was deserving of the #1 overall draft pick last year out of LSU, and is truly a generational pitcher with it. His numbers on that fastball, although through only 15 games, is a big enough sample to attempt to build a narrative on. As Sports Illustrated suggested, he has shown a downward trend in his fastball velocity. But is that really an issue? And is that trend carrying through the course of a game? To answer these questions in short, no, it's not an issue. And sort of, his speed fluctuates. But let me explain a little bit more in detail. And just a forewarning, there's going to be lots of numbers that will be thrown around here. As you saw in the Sports Illustrated reference, Paul has shown a pretty steady drop from his fastest first inning pitch. However, these are peak pitches, and just in the first inning. What does it look like if we expand and look at it from a broader scope? You can see a deeper look in the month of May, his rookie month. Paul starts off games with a blazing fastball average of 100.11, and it tails down through the 3rd inning. The odd variance being the 4th inning, but aside from that, Paul showed natural speed regression throughout an average game. This is all pretty normal stuff here, so let's look at each month after that to see if there's a better picture to be painted. In June, he starts off games with a similar blazing speed, and consistently carries that speed within a mile per hour throughout the course of a start, and impressively enough, his 7th inning speed is as fast as his 3rd inning speed. As for July, this is the first month where Paul doesn't average any inning with a fastball quicker than 99.5. This is also where we start to see the dip become a bit more dramatic, but yet we still see some statistical oddities. Similar to the month of June, Skenes shows that he tires around the mid-innings of a game, reaching as low as an average of 97.87 on his fastball, which would still be the 50th fastest speed in the Statcast era if carried out for a month, and that's on Skenes' low end. But interestingly enough, he shows that when the spotlight is at its brightest, he's not afraid to crank it back up. As in innings 7 through 9, Skenes' mile per hour average rises back up to 99.06, which is just shy of his first inning average fastball speed for the month. Needless to say, but Paul Skenes is an absolute force to be reckoned with, even if he shows that he is wearing out. And lastly, for the monthly averages, we have August, a month in which we only have 2 starts to go off of, and these are harder to build a narrative around than the previous months. To put simply, he has shown his average fastball speed is nearly a linear decline by inning, but this may be the Pirates' asking him to slow it down. To me, these numbers aren't concerning, especially when you see his pitch mix and effectiveness, that of which I'll be showing next. But also of note, his fastball speed is starting to come closer to replicating that of his splinker, or as Statcast calls it, a sinker. This may actually turn out to be a very effective result of his declining average speed on his fastball, because of how batters perceive them. If a batter is sitting on fastball and gets a sinker, they'll be met with a harsher moving action than a steady fastball. Additionally, the batter will only have 3 to 4 miles per hour difference that they have to account for rather than a 6 to 7 difference, and believe me, those can be huge margins. If Paul continues this trend of slowing his fastball down while maintaining his sinker speed, batters can expect lots of trouble on the high velocity pitches, as if they weren't already. But in order to understand where Paul's recent struggles have come from, let me show you what he's working with in terms of his pitching repertoire. When you take a look at Paul's pitch mix and usage rates among those pitches, there's varying trends, and ones that I believe paint a better picture for the namesake of the video. Paul Skenes is well known for being a power pitcher, so it shouldn't be very surprising that his splitter, or as Statcast refers to it, his changeup, his maximum usage was only 10% with an average usage at 3.4, making it his least used pitch and least reliable to be used for a put-away moment or strikeout pitch. His curveball is his least effective, something I will hit on in just a moment, but his usage of the pitch is climbing at a pretty steady rate compared to when he debuted, and it now makes up 12.3% of the pitches he throws on average this season. His third most used pitch is his slider. This pitch seemingly is on a downward trend in terms of usage, but to me this seems more based on the lineup he is facing that day and the likelihood of the slider being effective against that particular lineup. Regardless, he averages throwing that pitch 16% of the time this year. And lastly, our final two pitches, his fastball and his splinker, or sinker according to Statcast. For the purposes of not confusing names, we'll just call it a sinker. His sinker is a pitch that has a similar trend line as his fastball, where it looks like the Michael Jordan shoulder shrug, but this pitch has been a very reliable put-away pitch and makes up 30.2% of all of his pitches this year. That leaves us with 38.1% to give to his four-seam fastball, of which I've already mentioned the quality of. With varying speeds in these pitches, Paul Skenes has a lethal repertoire of 5 pitches that can put people away on fast or slow sequences. One thing that I think is getting overlooked when it comes to Paul's recent struggles, and I say struggles loosely, is that he is mixing up his pitches far differently now than when he broke into the league. His effectiveness is still at an elite level, but not quite as effective as previously, and the best way to look at this is going to be in 3 parts: starts 1 through 5, starts 6 through 12, and starts 13 through 15. Each of these has a story to tell and will help identify where the struggles may be coming from for the young rookie. As mentioned earlier, Paul is a power pitcher who thrives on his fastball to carry the workload, and in starts 1 through 5, he relied on it far more frequently than the other pitches in his arsenal. Even though his fastball at this time was highly touted, hitters weren't exactly shocked that it was going to be pitched to them. In turn, batters worked favorably against his fastball, resulting in 13 hits across 45 at-bats, making a .288 batting average. However, it was his usage of the sinker that helped him out. In games 1 through 5, batters recorded just 2 hits across 34 at-bats that finished with that pitch. And as far as his off-speed goes, he struggled to utilize these style of pitches properly in tandem to one another, and most notably, his slider saw the most struggle points. Batters hit a staggering .384 against Paul's slider in games 1 through 5, and even though it was a good strikeout pitch at this point for him, it didn't come without its own set of risks. And as I mentioned earlier about his curveball being his least effective pitch, during this span, Paul didn't record a single out on the curveball until the 4th game. It wasn't until game 5 that Paul was able to utilize the curveball to its true potential, where he struck out 3 batters on it within the span of 7 curveball outs that game. All that said, his pitch mix in this span was that of a development, and that's where you see in games 6 through 12, we start to see the incorporation of a new style and results. Starts 6 through 12 for Paul are his most dominant to date. In this span, he went 3-1 with a 1.32 ERA and did that behind the strength of 59 strikeouts in just under 48 innings of work. So what made him so successful during this stretch? Well, it was his willingness to stick to his guns and not overcomplicate the process. During this stretch, his pitch mix and usage was consistent and had very few outliers. The only notable one being the July 23rd start against the Cardinals, where he opted for a fastball-heavy approach. He used it 51.9% of the time, compared to his usual 36.37 usage in the same span for the fastball. And this would largely stem from the fact that the St. Louis Cardinals are the 6th worst team in baseball when hitting the fastball. But I digress again. There is a start in this span that I would like to highlight as being what I'd lean on as being Paul's best game in his career so far. This start was his masterclass against the Milwaukee Brewers on July 11th. On this particular start, Skenes matched a career high in strikeouts with 11, while holding the Brewers hitless over 7 innings of dominant work. He was pulled controversially due to his pitch count. Beyond just the fact that Paul flirted with history, he also utilized his pitch mix the best on this start too. As I mentioned earlier, Paul will likely become most effective effective when his fastball can come as a disguise with his sinker due to the decline in average speed. During the game, these pitches' usage rates were only separated by 5%. Better yet, he did this to an even narrower margin with his curveball and slider, where they were only separated by 2%. With these narrow margins, Paul was able to keep batters guessing all day long, and the Brewers showed little resistance, only managing a walk and a hit by pitch. This game going forward should be the blueprint for a successful outing for Paul Skenes. For starts 13 through 15, Paul has regressed not only with his fastball velocity, but also statistically. He has gone 1-2 with a 3.63 ERA while striking out 18 in 17.1 innings of work. This is a complete opposite of what he was previously working with, and there's much to be made of this. Fresh off the heels in Game 12, where Paul uses fastball a staggering 51.9% of the time, the most in his career so far, mind you, Paul cut that rate nearly in half for Game 13. This game signaled the start of a change for the rookie, as his sinker usage overtook his fastball for just the third time. It's also during this span that we are seeing his sinker get hit a lot more. Batters are starting to sit on that pitch rather than the fastball, and it's working, as batters are 6 for 17 on it in games 13 through 15. And you're probably thinking, didn't you just say that his sinker was the key to recording outs? Yes, I did, but the pitch mix is everything, as he has changed up his incorporation of his off-speed pitches as well. By using off-speed more often, it leaves batters in a more comfortable position to sit on a sinker as opposed to a fastball. The logic behind that is, his sinker averages around 93.5 miles per hour, and his off-speed at about 84 miles per hour for all three pitches. By sitting on a slower, high-velocity pitch, it allows a hitter not only to be ready for that pitch, but also easier to make adjustments for off-speed, as they have more time to prepare for that pitch that's incoming. When asked about it, Pete Alonso had a similar approach by saying that if you're ready for 100 miles per hour, everything else is easier to pick up on. That's why it's concerning to see his use of the curveball rise from just 2.4% to 19.8% with his last start. And with that curveball usage, Paul has made it his third most used pitch now. Though it's an effective pitch, I still believe the slider is the key to getting outs as far as his off-speed pitches go. So now at this point, you're probably wondering about how effective his fastball is during this time. And to put it simply, it's been far more effective than the sinker. He's only allowed 5 hits in 21 at-bats to result in a batting average of .238, all while striking out 7 batters on the pitch in this time frame. So this means when a batter is sitting on a sinker, which most seem to be doing now, they have a harder time catching up to the fastball regardless of their regressing velocity. But that was all the information I had for you, and it's a lot, so I can understand if some of you guys were confused. But the main takeaway after all of this information is displayed here is that even though Sports Illustrated pointed out that he is regressing on his fastball speeds, it should not come as a concern, but rather this should be seen as a young pitcher learning the game as he goes. It's also worth pointing out that Paul barely has any sort of precedent. This type of skill is hard to comprehend, and for a pitcher who is still in college last year, this is not a thing to be seen as concerning in the slightest. This should rather make all baseball fans excited that we are watching a brand of baseball that we've never seen before at such an elite level. Of course, there may be the argument of potential injury, and that may come along as almost every pitcher will deal with that throughout the course of a season or their careers. But for the moment, Paul Skenes is every bit electric as he is a learner of the game. We just so happen to be witnessing one of the brightest futures the game of baseball has ever seen. Anyways, that's all I have for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully if you made it this far in the video, I didn't confuse the hell out of you or piss you off too much. Regardless, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.